The rain arrived not with a gentle pitter-patter, but with the sharp, insistent sting of a long-held ache, finally breaking free. It was a late summer storm, sweeping through the quiet Ohio suburban street, mirroring the turmoil in Jason Hale's own private world. He opened his front door, expecting the familiar hush of an empty house, the quiet echo of his solitude. Instead, she was there, Clara Bennett, utterly drenched, a delicate tremor running through her frame, her eyes fixed on him as if he were the last harbor in a tempest. It wasn't the rain-soaked fabric clinging to her curves that first caught his breath, nor the glistening drops caught in her lashes. It was the profound vulnerability in her gaze, a soft, spent quality that only appears when tears have long since dried, and the heart has nowhere left to flee. In that raw, suspended moment, the world outside dissolved, leaving only the sound of rain, the shallow catch in his own breath, and the undeniable pull between two souls whose paths were about to intertwine in a way neither had anticipated. He hadn't seen Clara in nearly 7 years, not since the careless days of college had scattered their lives like dandelion seeds on the wind. Back then, she was a sunbeam, wrapped in a laugh, her worries often hidden behind a bright, defiant smile. Now, standing on his porch, she carried the quiet weight of countless storms, yet still possessed the formidable strength to knock on his door. Jason stepped aside, an unspoken invitation in his gesture, letting her into the warmth without a single question. He closed the door with a tender caution, as if the slightest sound might shatter the fragile moment. Or perhaps her. Clara spoke of driving to Chicago, of a life she was trying to piece back together after a relationship that had frayed her spirit thin. The storm, she explained, had ambushed her, forcing her off the road. And as she realized, she was mere blocks from the house where she'd once found laughter during college breaks. A quiet whisper had urged her forward, a desperate plea to see if the world still held a corner where she felt safe. Jason listened, his presence a steady anchor. He noticed the slight tremble in her hands as she spoke, the subtle hitch in her voice when she tried to project a strength she didn't quite feel. He moved with a quiet purpose, brewing tea, then finding one of his old, worn college hoodies and gently guiding her into its soft embrace. The fabric, still carrying the faint scent of him, settled around her, a comforting warmth against the chill. He sat opposite her at the kitchen table, studying her with an intensity reserved for something profoundly cherished. Like a rediscovered painting, the hours unfurled with a languid grace, heavy with the weight of years and the unspoken truths that now hung between them. He remembered the small, intimate details, her adoration for thunderstorms, her quiet fear of disappointing others, the way her laughter would bubble up unexpectedly at her own jokes. Clara, in turn, recalled his steady, unwavering kindness, his uncanny ability to sense when someone was quietly struggling, and the way he'd etch short, poignant poems in the margins of his notebooks. Believing no one would ever see, life had pulled them apart, but the intervening years hadn't managed to erase the gentle familiarity that settled over them once more, like a beloved old blanket. As the storm deepened outside, its fury a counterpoint to the growing stillness within the house, Jason offered her the guest room, but Clara's smile, soft and almost shy, held a delicate mix of fragility and hopeful longing. Her gaze met his, lingering just a breath too long, before she reached up to brush a loose strand of hair from her cheek. In a voice barely above a whisper, laced with both apprehension and an undeniable yearning, she posed a question she would never have dared years ago. "Is your bed big enough for two?" Jason's breath hitched, not in surprise, but in a profound acknowledgement of the raw honesty in her voice, the brave leap of faith she was taking. He closed the small distance between them, not quite touching, but letting the quiet electricity of their proximity speak volumes. "Only if you're the one beside me," he murmured, his voice a low, steady current. It wasn't a moment of abrupt desire, but one of profound refuge. Two souls, long adrift, finally finding a port where the world's cacophony quieted to a gentle hum. They didn't sleep as lovers that night, not in the way the world understands it. They shared the bed like two people who had weathered unforgiving storms, now seeking the fundamental solace of warmth, the undeniable comfort of another presence, the steady, rhythmic assurance of a shared heartbeat. Clara was the first to succumb, her tears drying on her cheeks as her breathing softened and evened. Jason lay awake for a long while, staring at the unseen ceiling, a quiet realization unfurling within him. He had never truly stopped caring for her. Not for a single year, not for a single moment. Morning arrived with sunlight, a gentle intrusion, slicing through the curtains and painting the room in a soft, golden glow. Clara woke slowly, a peace settling upon her features that hadn't been there the night before. She offered a quiet apology for her intrusion, for the tears, for the raw vulnerability she'd displayed. But Jason gently shook his head, his gaze steady and warm. "You never have to apologize for needing a place to breathe," he said, the sincerity in his voice a balm. He made breakfast, and they carried their plates to the back porch, watching the world outside dry from the storm, fresh and glistening. And there, amidst the quiet aftermath, Clara allowed herself to laugh, a light, genuine sound that resonated deep within Jason's chest, stirring an ache he hadn't felt in years, an ache of forgotten joy, of quiet longing. As the day unfolded, Clara confessed the pervasive feeling of being lost, of having shrunk herself, forgotten who she truly was. After years of conforming to someone else's expectations, Jason listened, truly listened, in the way only someone who deeply cares can. He offered no easy platitudes, no hollow promises. Instead, he painted a quiet portrait of the girl she used to be, the dreamer, the teller of tales, the one who found extraordinary beauty in the ordinary world. She blinked back tears, a sudden, sharp realization hitting her. No one had seen her like that in years. She stayed for 3 days of long, meandering conversations, of quiet recovery, of slowly uncovering pieces of herself she believed were irrevocably lost. Jason never pressed, never urged her to stay longer, never made her feel indebted. He simply created a space, a sanctuary where she could breathe, rebuild, and slowly remember that she was worthy of gentle things. But on the 4th morning, Clara knew she had to continue her journey. She needed to start anew, to gather the courage to construct a life that was truly her own. Jason nodded, a familiar tightening in his chest at the thought of her leaving. He walked her to the front door, the very same threshold where she had appeared, drenched and broken, just days before she stepped outside. Clara turned, her gaze meeting his with a softness that held gratitude, affection, and something deeper still. Something that felt like the nascent stirrings of love. "If life gives us another chance," she whispered, her voice a delicate promise, "maybe I'll come back, not broken, not lost, but ready." Jason managed a faint smile, an effort to conceal the quiet ache that settled in his chest. "I'll be here," he replied, his voice a low, steady anchor. Clara drove away, and Jason remained on his porch, standing long after her car had vanished from view. The memory of her smile, a lingering warmth in the crisp morning air. He didn't know when, or even if, she would return. But he knew something fundamental had shifted, not just for her, but for him too. Sometimes, love isn't a sudden, electrifying spark. Sometimes, it's a quiet promise, whispered in a moment when two hearts finally find the courage to speak their truth. His quiet porch in Ohio had reminded him of something vital. Even after the longest storms, even after heartbreak and the deepest fears, love, in its own gentle way, always finds its way home.